Today we're going to be taking a look at two new small receivers for ExpressLRS from BetaFPV. The first of these is a traditional tower style receiver with that Molex antenna. However, the second one has something we haven't seen before, which is a PCB chip antenna. This video isn't really a review because I've not had the chance to test them fully myself yet, but it's going to be more of an overview of what the differences are and what this new receiver is all about, its antenna, and talk a bit about other people's experiences as well, because whilst it offers some interesting options for protecting the antenna, it does appear to come at a cost. Anyway, let's get on with it and let's take a closer look at the receivers first of all. Okay, so jumping in and taking a closer look at both of these new receivers. Now we have our traditional EP style receiver with a Molex tower antenna fitted, and then we have this new receiver with this small chip style antenna, and this is the first time that we've seen this antenna on an ExpressLRS receiver. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one because there really isn't a lot to say here other than it is pretty much the same as all of the small receivers you're seeing with that chip style antenna. They do use a bigger crystal, but it does have that traditional Molex antenna. It has the ESP chipset on the back. Just to move that there. We have the little Wi-Fi antenna. It has our output pins. And really, if you're looking for an ultra small receiver for your ExpressLRS system, this, just like the EP series from Happy Model or the Flywoo, will absolutely do the job. The real interesting one is this one with this chip antenna, because this is a bit different to what we've seen before. And the benefits of this one over this tower antenna is how well it's going to hold up to bumps and scrapes. Whilst these tower antennas do an amazing job, they do stick off the board and they are quite easy to be able to get ripped off. Whereas this antenna, if I hold it up, and we will put it under the microscope a little bit in a minute, you can see sits about the same thickness as the PCB and sits flat on the top of it. And whilst it does stick up, it is better overall, much less chance of it getting ripped off the board, and it should make for a much more resilient receiver. Now, it does beg the question though, what is the performance of this antenna compared to the tower antenna? And this is where things get a little bit interesting. The tower antenna has a dB rating of about 3.6, whereas the chip has a rating of around 3.2. The radiation pattern is different between these two. So for instance, the tower antenna does tend to have a more omnidirectional pattern, whereas this little chip antenna does tend to have nulls on either side. If you don't know what nulls are, they are areas of the antenna that either perform very poorly or don't receive a signal at all. I will be talking about antenna performance in a separate video in the future, and if you're interested in seeing that one, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and you'll get a notification when it comes out. Now, I haven't done a huge amount of long-range testing between these two receivers, or especially this one compared to others, but other people have, and we have started to see some behavior come to light. The performance of this chip antenna doesn't appear to be as good as people hoped or expected. Whether that is due to the fact of just how well these tower antennas work and this was always going to be compromised, I'm not sure. People are seeing some strange results on when it's actually hitting the failsafe with these, and that has been fed back to BetaFPV. So really, as it stands today, it doesn't offer the same level of performance that we see on the tower one. Now that begs the question, does it mean it's a bad receiver or does it mean it offers poor performance? The reality is today, it does offer less performance than these, but that doesn't necessarily make it bad. It just means it's going to be used for a different application. There are also some really interesting differences when you dive into these antennas on what matching circuit is needed to actually get them set up. For instance, the matching circuit needed on the tower antenna is very basic. However, looking at the data sheet for these chip antennas, it is much more complex. However, having looked at the design between these two PCBs, and we will put them under the microscope in a minute, they are basically the same. So I'm not 100% sure if BetaFPV have gone as far as the manufacturer states, but it is also worth me stating that there are some great guys doing some tests on these receivers, and they're actually deboarding that antenna, putting it on a proper matched circuit, and they are seeing much lower results than we would get from the tower antenna. For me, I think the basics are, they are both good, but they are, again, for different applications. In many ways, I think these tower antennas really do outperform what they should. And I think what we're getting on these is probably a little bit closer to reality. However, there is something else going on that the guys are digging into at the moment. Just popping both of these under the microscope just to give you a quick look at the differences in the setup. The board placement and component layout has moved around a little bit on both of these, but the overall setup is exactly the same. So we have our SX1281 on both boards. We have our antenna, and you can see the chip antenna located here, and that is the NN02-201. And then we got our tower antenna. And then if we look at the feed lines, what we've got is our antenna on this one feeds into what would usually be a filter, but it is a rather unusual component on this one, because on most of the ExpressLRS receivers, it's a 4-pin component, not a 6-pin one. It may be a band pass filter, a low pass filter, or matching filter. We're not exactly sure, but you can see the antenna comes down, goes in, and then that center pin goes out into the SX1281. Whereas on this chip antenna, whilst there is a little difference, we do have a capacitor. The overall layout is very much the same. So again, it comes out of the SX1281 into this filter, and then through the capacitor into the antenna. And the antenna then is mounted directly flat to the PCB. So if I actually take this one here and flip this one up just to show you guys, you can see that that antenna is soldered to the board. Whereas on this one, the pads for it are actually underneath. You can't actually see them, but the pads are located underneath. And then the feed line goes in here on it, from that capacitor down and in, and there's no other areas of feeding in. And then what they've done then is on the back of the board, just moving that down so you guys can see, you can see they've kept this a big open area, again probably as part of the specification, with our little Wi-Fi antenna located on the side here. There is no question that this does make a very, very nice package. Just look at the thickness down there. It is so much better. However, unfortunately, that extra resilience is coming at a cost compared to this chip antenna that we have with the tower one. Sorry, it does come at a cost compared to this. But I do think these just perform so well, probably very much outperform, in the sense of they probably do much better than they really should. And that's as a result of how ExpressLRS works. So, as I've said, this isn't a review because I've not been able to put them through heavy testing myself. What is interesting is this chip antenna isn't appearing to perform as well as we had hoped. It remains to be seen, is that as a result of the antenna itself, or is it due to the implementation? There are people doing some really interesting tests, like Sandor's taking it off and putting it on its own board and making sure the matching circuit's correct, and he's still seeing fairly low results even then. I think my opinion on the situation is that the antenna is compromised. It is to be expected in something that is going to be as close to the PCB as it is. And whilst it's going to offer some really interesting options for very close range, you're probably going to be better with a more traditional antenna receiver for the long range stuff. There is still some question marks over the point it's entering failsafe as well, because some RSI readings aren't adding up, and I think BetaFPV are looking into that one. If you are interested in getting them, there is a link to them in the description of this video. It isn't an affiliate link. Just to be clear, BetaFPV did send me both of these receivers for free. However, as I've said, it's not really a review, but that hasn't influenced my opinion anyway. If there are Today we're going to be taking a look at this, the updated TX Micro from BetaFPV. On this channel I reviewed the original version, which is the 500 milliwatt. However, now we have a new 1 watt version that not only has higher power output, but it also adds the ExpressLRS backpack functionality as well. In this video, we'll take a bit of a closer look at it, strip it apart, have a look at how well it's made, and then at the end, I'll give you my thoughts having spent quite a bit of time with this module. Now, just to be clear up front, BetaFPV have sent me this for free. However, they have not paid for this video, they have not seen it before it's gone live, and they've had no influence in its content or my opinion. Anyway, let's get on with it and let's take a closer look at this module first of all.